You are all fucking cowards for getting offended by Goblin Slayer just because it has a little bit of rape in it. That makes it bad art. That makes the points that it makes less serious because it has a real world event that occurs to people. The existence of rape in and of itself does not devalue art, and the presentation of rape in and of itself does not devalue art, because presenting things in an over-the-top fashion like Magical Girl Sight can make a point in and of itself. For example, in Magical Girl Sight, it took the issues of suicide, it took the issues of self-harm and bullying and all these other things to a very extreme point. But part of the point of the show was that it was so extreme, that because these things were so extreme that it was able to convey a message about how these people view the world, about how people with mental illness view the world. My girlfriend, Rizzy the Weeb, she had talked about in her video about Magical Girl Sight how the way the show worked was that it basically viewed the world from the eyes of someone with mental illness. There are clearly elements of that show that resonate with some people. Some people have experienced these things in their life. The events that occur in Magical Girl Sight are not so absurd that they couldn't happen in reality. There are things that have even happened to me that reflect the things that took place in Magical Girl Sight. Not to get into too much detail, but there are some correlations here and there within the show that I can make to my own life. So if I can do that, then it isn't such a crazy idea to say that that show has some merit, that that show could be viewed in a way that is artistic, that simply having it be over the top was not something that made it bad. Goblin Slayer is much of the same way. Just because they present these subjects so over the top does not necessarily make it make less of a point. Part of the point could be in how it is conveyed. And even so, even if it was simply viewing rape as a flippant element, if it was simply putting rape in because it's a rape, there's nothing bad about that. If that triggers you, that is your problem that you need to cope with. As a victim of sexual assault myself, I can say full well that I know how much it hurts to have those nightmares, how much it hurts to have those flashbacks. But those are simply elements of your life that you need to address and that you need to fix. I've gotten to a point where seeing that stuff in fiction doesn't hurt me anymore. It used to. I've been able to develop myself to a point where seeing such things is not something that overtly terrifies me anymore or anything like that. In fact, at times it's something I might even enjoy as an aesthetic thing. So if I can do it, I know you can. If it's a triggering thing, then to cope with that thing, what you need to do is realize what it is, realize the effects it has on you, where it came from, and then try to address that, try to cope with it, talk to a therapist, read a self-help book, whatever you need to do, but don't simply try to keep art from existing or to obfuscate anything that has anything to do with that subject out of your purview, because if you do that, then you are simply stifling the creativity of others. You are simply allowing people who could enjoy this art to not enjoy that art. And that's something that shouldn't happen, because expression of how others view the world is an inherently valuable thing. If people can go out there and say, hey, I have this perspective on this thing, so I'm going to express that through art, and people can interpret it however they want, that is an inherently good thing, because it is allowing others to contextualize themselves through media. There are people who are going to watch Goblin Slayer and give it a 10 because they contextualize themselves through it in some way. Maybe not as directly as I might have with Magical Girl Sight or Bebop or any of these other shows that I call my favorites, but in some way, people can look at the elements present in Goblin Slayer and they can say, I can relate to this in some way. This says something to me as an individual. That art should not be censored or told not to exist simply because a few people had their toes stepped on. Those rape victims need to, to put it frankly, get the fuck over it. they need to look at their lives and they need to look at the mental processes that go about when they see these things and see how they can change them. And when it comes to people who are simply on the pity party for victims of sexual assault who get offended by a fucking anime that isn't real, by the way, look at what you're doing. Look at the effects that this has on society as a whole, on individuals, and think about how is this affecting other people. Is what I'm doing contributing in some way? Is this valuable, or am I just getting offended over this for nothing? Because the reason you're getting offended over this is not for any slight that was put upon you, it is for a potential slight that could be levied upon other people who you don't know, who have feelings that in and of themselves could be changed. So at that point, you're essentially letting yourself get offended by it. You're choosing to get offended by this thing out of moral pretense that are not even justified in the first place. Like, think about what you're doing. Is this art morally wrong? And in what way? Is what this art doing somehow making the cultural paradigms that we exist in worse? And in the case of rape in art, the only thing that can do is desensitize people from feeling upset and bad when they see it, which is a good thing because it's the same as the word nigger. If you say the word nigger enough times in enough friendly contexts, eventually the word loses its power. And obviously rape is a different subject, and we should all know that rape is a bad thing and shouldn't happen, and we should keep it from happening, and we should be sensitive about the fact that it does happen. But simply talking about it, and talking about it in the context of art, simply trying to express what the world is through art, should not be something that offends people. That should be something we become desensitized to and are able to analyze as logical thinking human beings. Because art is simply a communication of what the world is to individuals. It is a siphoning of one's perspective. It does not necessarily advocate rape by showing it in a flippant and even gleeful way at times. It is simply showing that people like this, who think this way, who have this perspective, do exist, and we can learn from that perspective. We can see what these people who made Goblin Slayer might be thinking, or what the characters in Goblin Slayer might be thinking, and how that reflects real life or doesn't reflect real life. There are things that we can learn from this. And so to simply say, oh, ban, 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 get it out, LMAO, I'm with her, I love Hillary, like, that's not going to fix anything. That's not going to progress humanity in any way. So if you're talking about progressivism and trying to be morally in the right, you are more morally in the wrong by trying to ban art and say that it's bad for existing. The people who are getting offended by Goblin Slayer are fucking pussies. They don't realize that art is not real, that it doesn't exist, and by the fact that it doesn't exist, it cannot affect you in the material world. If no actions are being levied upon individuals, if no individuals are being hurt physically, then all you are talking about is feelings. Feelings can easily be changed. It's not as if these artists are intentionally going to someone's house and screaming all of the triggers for their PTSD at them. No, they are simply creating a piece of art that you can choose to consume or choose not to consume. And it is not my place to tell you how to live your life, to tell you how to fix the emotional problems within your life. But I can simply offer a suggestion. If something actively offends you, don't watch it. Just don't look at it. If Goblin Slayer is a bad thing to you, don't fucking look at it. It's that simple. Just don't look at the things that trigger you if it bothers you that much. And a word of advice on how to cope with things: try not to be triggered. Try to address them and see how these things affect your life and see how they can affect your life in the future, and try to find a way to cope with that by thinking about it. Having this art exist is simply allowing many people to do that. The fact that hentai with rape in it exists, for example. As I've heard, Digi talk about how she used lolly porn and things of that nature to deal with traumas that she had within her own life. By being able to look at these things within art It is allowing people to contextualize their own feelings and in some ways get over them, in some ways to become desensitized to them as a concept to where they can move on. And by having that art exist, it is a good thing for them emotionally. It's just like the word nigger. If you say the word nigger enough in enough friendly context and enough non-hateful context, eventually the word loses its power. The concept of rape can lose its power by art like Goblin Slayer existing. It doesn't devalue the fact that rape is a terrible thing. That's not the point. The point is that it makes people not abjectly horrified as soon as the concept is presented in a conversation. And thus, now that the thing exists, we can now talk about it comfortably without people raising their hands and going, oh, geez, terrible, get Hillary in here. No, it's you just do the thing. You just watch the goddamn show, or you don't watch the goddamn show. Stop being fucking stupid. Jesus, I hate humanity. All of you people are so stupid.